Week 2 of the NFL season starts today, and they often say the biggest transition from an NFL team is from week 1 to week 2. We can find out who they truly are, but let's get into it. All right, Amir. Last week we both went 11-5. Of course, we both had these same exact predictions, unintentionally, by the way. But welcome to the show for one. Happy you can make it back for week 2.
I'm happy to be back. Last week, this past week was definitely, a fun week of football. I say this is probably the most entertaining, opening games I've seen in a while. You start to, you go ahead and start the year off with KC versus Baltimore. That was an amazing game. That Philly versus Green Bay game, that was an amazing game also as well. And, it was kind of some surprise games that kind of caught me off guard this past Sunday as well, too. So it was fun.
Yeah, New England, most
Yeah.
notably, right? Who would have thought? Let's get to the NFL power rankings of week number 2. Amir, we're going to do this every single week, just like we did last year. I'll give my top 10, your top 10. We'll see how much is different. We both agreed that Cincinnati fell out of our top 10s. And we know they start slow. Joe Burrow's like 1-3 in openers in his career, but still, you lost to a team that most people didn't think we're going to win more than 5 games this year. The Patriots are on track to do so. You fall out of the top 10. Some other teams that are right outside. Of course, Pittsburgh has an argument, but we worry about the quarterback play. The Colts, despite a loss, Anthony Richardson was special. We'll talk about him later. The Dolphins, of course, they started off slow, but they picked it up second half and got a big win against Jacksonville. So again, they're right outside the top 10 for both of us. For me, top 10, we're going to go Buffalo. Despite Josh Allen's hand and all these stuff that they lost on paper, they still got the job done, and they pulled together second half against Arizona, and that defense only allowed 31 passing yards in the second half. Man, that defense was special second half. The Rams at number 9, you lost, but you also lost Puka Nacua, so that moves you down a spot as well. But outside of that, I still believe in the Rams. The Jets, it didn't look pretty, but you had, first game back from Aaron Rodgers. Hassan Reddick was at home sleeping. I want to see some fine tuning going forward. Dallas, that defense was as advertised, if not better. And this offense, despite losing Jake Ferguson, dominated the number 1 defense and defensive player from last year. Baltimore moves down one spot despite their loss. I want to see them get Mark Andrews involved a little bit more, but still, it's still Baltimore. They're still going to be a great regular season team, and they're going to bounce back. They just happen to run into Kansas City. Number 5 is Philly. The offense looked great. Defense, still some questions in the secondary. But this week, I think it's a big week to get a big win against a team like Atlanta. And number 4, Houston, they look scary, right? Stephon Diggs. We got a report, Amir, like 3 seconds into the game. It feels like Stephon Diggs is already complaining on the sideline. And then he goes down and scores one. And then he scores another. Nico Collins looked amazing. This team, it's one thing to have expectations, another thing to live up to them. Houston's doing exactly that so far. The top 3, we know what teams are in the top 3. Should be everybody's consensus. But what order? Well, all 3 teams did exactly what I thought they would do week 1. I'm going to stick with it. Kansas City 1, Detroit 2, and San Fran. Their depth is crazy, but they're at number 3. Amir, go ahead.
So for me, my number 10 spot, and listen, I'm a huge Josh Allen guy, but, I didn't want to jump the gun and put them at 10 because I'm still, me personally, I still think this team is fool's gold. Obviously, I'm high on Josh Allen. I think he's the second best quarterback in the league. But, I think this team still has a lot of holes and, in a depleted roster. Also lacking, some firepower offensively. But, based on how they looked week 1 in the second half, it's kind of hard for me to not put them in the top 10, especially since in recent history, Josh Allen is known for dominating, teams that are outside the top 10. And so I got Buffalo at 10 and the 9 spot, the Rams. Honestly, I wasn't going to move them down one. Just, for the simple fact that, they played Detroit, a consensus top 3 team in football. But, with the injuries, losing Puka and also multiple offensive linemen, I kind of have to. And so at my 8th spot, I had the Jets. And, I didn't want to move them either because, they lost to San Fran, which is definitely, it's San Fran, but they got dominated. I'm going to be honest. And, A-Rod, honestly, he showed flashes of him still being him. I think he will eventually, get back to that. But, seeing him get dominated, by this San Fran offense and pretty much, dominating, their mantra as a team, which is defense, I had to move them down one. And, at my 7th spot is Dallas. I hated I had to do this, but, I love Cleveland. I love our defense. Last year, the best defense in football, they made us look like we were back in poverty. They should have dominated us on both sides of the ball. made Deshaun look lost out there. The sixth spot, I have Baltimore in the same spot. Baltimore lost to Kansas City, by a hair, So I pretty much left them the same. At
Eerily
5, I have
similar
Philly.
so far, right? Eerily similar, same 6 through 10. Hopefully, it doesn't stay the same. Go ahead. Number 5 is Philly.
Yeah, I mean Philly at 5. I think Philly, the defense definitely is still a question, but they're young, they'll figure it out. But offensively, it's scary. Houston, absolutely scary. I mean, this offense is elite. The defense looked really, really good, against a great offensive team. And, most importantly, I mean, that run game dominated. If Joe Mixon, does this the entire season, it's no stopping Houston. At the 3 spot, this is where we probably differ here. You
Yes.
know,
First difference.
Detroit, I didn't want to move them down, but I think the team that's above them just played that good. And also Detroit, I mean, that second half they really struggled, offensively against a team that's kind of, depleted with injuries early on. And, seeing the Rams almost take that win, it was kind of hard for me to really keep Detroit over San Fran because San Fran looked that good. And so San Fran's at 2, KC at 1. I think, these are the obvious top 3. 2 and 3 is definitely debatable. But seeing San Fran, but no McCaffrey, to sort of dominate a great defense like that on the ground and in the air, I have to put them at 2.
Yeah, to see how much they dominated last week and the fact that they're getting one of the best players in football, period, back into their offense, scary to think about the potential and the ceiling of the San Francisco 49ers. So the only difference we had, Amir, was 2 and 3. And now, again, last year, that was how it was to start the year as well. And then it got really different throughout the season. So stay tuned, right? Next week might be completely different. But let's get into it here. Thursday Night Football, week 2 starts tonight. We have the Buffalo Bills at 1-0. Last week, Superman or Super Allen did end up showing up. And in that second half, of course, he rallied the Bills all the way back after it kind of looked like a subpar first half. They ended up getting the win, and that defense shut out that Arizona offense second half. They held McBride to 1 or 2 catches, Marvin Harrison to 1 catch, and of course, Kyler to 31 passing yards in the second half. The Bills' defense dominated. That home field advantage is underrated at times. But this defense, now, of course, Josh Allen had a hand injury as well. They have a big challenge ahead of them, a bigger challenge than Arizona. They play Miami. And of course, I talked about this yesterday on our fantasy football show, but Tua Tagovailoa is 1-6 against the Buffalo Bills in his career. He actually averages in those 7 games more interceptions than touchdowns. I just rounded it up for Tua's sake. This is a team that last week didn't have a great start to the first half, pulled it together second half. So both of those teams, they can share that same story. But your thoughts on this matchup, Amir? Can the Bills continue to get it done? Josh Allen has a hurt hand. Or do you think the speed and, of course, of Miami can get them to win here in week number 2?
As great as Josh Allen is, as high, I am on him. I think this speed is going to be too much for this Buffalo defense. Seeing last year, how slow they started. I'm gonna be honest. If that defense starts off slow like last week, Tyreek Hill's going to have 200 yards, and I think that's a major problem. And I'm not concerned about Josh Allen being able to drive down the field because Josh Allen owns Miami. He's literally 10-2 in his career against them. If I'm getting it right, and I just think defensively, Buffalo has way too many holes that Miami can get exposed.
I'm gonna differ from you here. Last week we had these same exact predictions, Amir. We're not gonna have that this week. I want to differ from you. I'm gonna take Buffalo for the exact reasons that you said. Josh Allen has dominated. Tua has struggled in this exact matchup throughout all the years that they've played. And I just, even though Miami has a better or a more talented roster, they should win this game, and I think they should be favored. I'd have to check the sports books. It's just something about Tua playing Buffalo that it just, I don't know if it's a mental thing or psychological thing for him. It's just that is by far his worst matchup in his career. And I'm going to take Buffalo here. On the road, I think Kincaid looks a lot better. I think James Cook looks a lot better in this offense. And they're going to be able to help out Josh Allen with his little hand injury. And this offense is going to look even better in week number 2. So again, trusting the history on this side. We're going to differ here to start week 2. This one, well, we're going to agree on this one for sure. San Francisco on the road, and their depth is crazy. Last week, Jordan Mason stepped up after never starting a game in his career. 28 touches, 150 yards, and a touchdown. I'd say that's pretty good. Brandon Ayuk didn't have much involvement in that offense, but he should continue to get more involvement. It's also weird, Amir, to see Debo in number one.
Yeah.
It took me a couple times to look at him. I'm like, wait, who's number one? Regardless, that offense was great as far as the second half or second quarter and on. They go to Minnesota. They play a guy that coaches a lot similar to Kyle Shanahan. They come under the same Shanahan tree and Kevin O'Connell. That offense in Minnesota last week, we doubted them, and they came out and delivered. And most notably, Sam Darnold, shout out to him. Now, again, last week they beat the Giants by 22 points. That was the largest win of Kevin O'Connell's career. I just don't think that San Fran will. I just don't think this is going to be much of a game. I wonder what the line's going to be at, but San Francisco, they should just double or triple team Justin Jefferson, especially now that Addison might miss this game with an ankle injury, and they should just let Sam Darnold beat them with the weapons around him. So I'm going to take San Fran here in the landslide.
Yeah, I'm taking Stanford on the road here. I think this is a no-brainer, but it's the NFL, so I wouldn't be surprised. Because last year, this exact game happened. San Fran went ahead to Minnesota, and Minnesota somehow won. So I wouldn't be surprised. But I think in this case, both teams are fully healthy. I think San Fran, kind of setting the tone early. In their debut for this season, I think without a doubt they win this game.
We're not going to elaborate too much more on that game. Again, I'd love to see an upset there. Kevin O'Connell's done it before, but I doubt it, especially because the San Fran team seems to be on a mission. NFC East matchup here. We have the New York Giants heading into Washington, and these two teams had subpar week ones. Let's just say that. The Giants, Daniel Jones threw a pick six in week number one, and with that pick six, he now has more pick sixes thrown than passing touchdowns since he signed that mega multi-million dollar deal. Not a great sign if you're a Giants fan. They had a bottom 10 offense last week. Defense did as much as they could, but defense can only do so much before the offense needs to step up. For the Commanders, it was the opposite. The defense was atrocious. They were terrible. Baker Mayfield lit them up. And the only positive that we can take away from week number one is that Jaden Daniels used his legs and he was very dynamic on the ground. And he was able to get the job done as far as the stat sheets go in that regard. But Amir, your thoughts on this NFC matchup? Do you think the Giants or the Commanders can bounce back?
I'm gonna be honest, Washington, last week, this Giants team is just a dumpster fire, on
Yes.
both sides of the ball. And, me and you both kind of agree, before the season that, based off that D line, the pass rush, they should be able to win some games this year. And I want to say it's gonna be this game, but I think, Jaden Daniels showed some promise last game to kind of, show like, okay, I got some potential, I got some talent. And, I think the fact that, him going from playing against, a team like Tampa Bay to completely playing a team like this in division at home, I'm taking Washington at home here.
Yeah, I'm going to say Washington at home. I think the home field advantage helps. And I know their defense was bad last week, but it's a veteran group, right? Led
Yeah.
by guys like Deron Payne. Of course, you have Jonathan Allen, Bobby Wagner. It's a veteran unit defensively, and especially under a defensive head coach in Dan Quinn. I think they can bounce back. I'm going to take Washington at home as well. Seattle goes to New England. I hate to say it, Seattle fans, but every time I see these two teams match up, all I could think about is what happened at the 1 yard line or what didn't happen. But of course, that was years before. Now here in 2024, it's a new age. It's a new era for both teams. Pete Carroll and Bill Belichick, long coaches of these franchises, they're gone, and it's new eras. Both of these teams started off this era with a win, and they look to continue that. Seattle under Mike McDonald, the defense looked good, and Kenneth Walker was dominant on the offensive side of the ball, just like we expected. Now, I do want to see them fine-tune some things. I don't want to see them have two safeties from their offense again this week, and hopefully that, if that doesn't happen, I think they're going to be off. They might have a really good chance to win this game, if I can talk correctly. For the Patriots, great start. Gerard Mayo shocked a lot of us. The young defense showed out. And Amir, I'm going to give you the floor here, but I saw a stat earlier about Christian Gonzalez. And this is a guy that I'm going to give you the floor here. Go ahead, but I want to talk about Christian Gonzalez in a moment. Who do you have in this game?
So, last week I think, was fool's gold. I'm not taking that win against Cincy, highly. Just for the simple fact that Zach Taylor in his career, is like 1 in 10 in opening games, something like that. Burrow's obviously, 1-3 as well. And I think this Seattle team just has too much. I think based off last week, they definitely did struggle at first, against a Denver group, but I think they got too much for this New England team, so I'm taking Seattle on the road here.
All right, so last year we were both big fans of Christian Gonzalez. I will agree, I will take Seattle as well. But Christian Gonzalez, of course, second-year corner from New England or from Oregon. He plays for New England, and he's only had 5 career games to this point after an early season injury last year. Now, in these 5 career games, Amir, these are some of the receivers that he's matched up with. And this is how well he's done. He's guarded Jamar Chase for 20 routes. Jamar was held to 3 receptions, 15 yards. He's guarded CeeDee Lamb for 10 routes, 0 receptions, 0 yards. Tyreek Hill, 17 routes, 0 receptions, 0 yards, and he got an interception last year. Jalen Waddle, 4 routes, 1 reception, 15 yards. And then when you look at a guy like Devontae Smith, 2 receptions, 22 yards on 22 snaps. Amir, those are some pretty dang good receivers, if I say so myself. And in 5 career games as a cornerback, really impressive. He's the face of this defense going forward. I just want to give him his flowers there because I'm also taking Seattle on the road. But your thoughts on Christian Gonzalez, Amir? I mean, incredible talent.
I think it's great. And, me being a corner myself, watching a guy like him, his technique and stuff like that, it's amazing. And
Yeah, I
I
mean,
was watching him all last camp. This camp as well. This camp he looked great. I mean, kind of looking at his one-on-one reps. His camp reps and stuff like that. I know for a fact he's coming on a mission this year.
absolutely. Again, hopefully he can help this Patriots team to a couple more wins down the line. But I don't think that win number 2 comes this week. You would agree. Here's an interesting matchup. The Chargers, under Jim Harbaugh, started off the way that we expected. With a win, they ran the ball and they protected the football. That is exactly what we expected in the Jim Harbaugh era. Outside of that, Ladd McConkey looked good, but the MVP of last week, Amir, was J.K. Dobbins. Of course, came back after an Achilles injury, and he might be one of the first running backs ever in NFL history to come off of an Achilles injury and look good this fast. 10 carries, 135 yards and a touchdown. Amir, he's averaging 13 and a half yards a carry. And if you were wondering about his explosiveness, that included a 61-yard touchdown. J.K. Dobbins, I'm excited that he's back, and I'm hoping for his sake and for our sake, injuries don't happen again. They play Carolina. They are the worst team in the NFL. Everything that we hyped them up to be in the offseason, it's not off to a great start. The defense is worse than expected. Bryce Young is the same old Bryce Young, and Dave Canales seemingly can't help Bryce Young, at least so far this year. They have maybe the worst offense, worst defense, and there's not many bright spots in this offense or just team in general. I'm going to take the Chargers on the road here to control the clock and maybe surprisingly, end up in a blowout like last week. I mean, you don't just accidentally give up 47 points to a subpar offense, Amir.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I'm taking, the Chargers on the roll here, without a doubt. And I think, for this Panthers team, the fact that, I mean, they made Derek Carr look like, he was a Pro Bowler again. And, I think that, this team on both sides of the ball has a lot of questions, way too many questions. And honestly, I mean, me and you both had them around, 5 to 6 wins, this year, and I think that this team has a long way to go.
Yeah. No, I mean, I want to ask you this. If this team wins 4 games, let's say, or 3 games, do you move off of Bryce Young after just 2 years?
I mean,
they would be in a position then to grab a guy like Carson Beck, Shedeur Sanders, or Quinn Ewers. Pick your poison there.
I mean, honestly, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, but I think as of right now, focus on building up a team. I mean, you bring Shedeur or Carson Beck or Quinn Ewers into this, it's going to be the same exact result, in my opinion.
Chargers in consensus there. Saints, we just talked about them. 47 points last week, by far and away the most by any NFL team. Derek Carr looked like his MVP self from like 10 years ago when he was there starting his career in Oakland. They go to Dallas. Dallas, and I'll say this, money well spent so far. Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, despite Jake Ferguson going down, they showed up and they showed out against the number 1 defense from last season. And the defense, with additions like Eric Kendricks, this defense, it picked up right where they left off. They're still a dominant group, and I think they might even look better than what they did throughout the regular season last year. It's only 1 week, right? And it was a subpar offense that they were playing, as a Browns fan we can admit. but the defense still looked great. Amir, your thoughts on this matchup? Can Derek Carr continue this MVP campaign?
I'm gonna be honest, I'm not buying it. From the Saints, I think it was more so the fact that the Panthers are that bad, and I still think that this Saints team still, has no chance. And I think Dallas should be able to dominate on both sides of the football. I would say, I think for the Saints, they're one of those teams that kind of has an identity. They'll always have a pretty good defense year to year. It's like watching Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh can have subpar talent defensively, and they still be good defensively.
Right.
Some teams have an identity. I think, the Saints team defensively is good. But I think, this Dallas pass rush is going to be way too much for Derek Carr.
Yeah, I want to see Chris Olave get a little bit more involved. I mean, they put up 47 and he only had like 3 catches for 21 yards. He is your lead guy. He should be your number one guy offensively. Want to see him get a little bit more involved, especially in an interesting matchup there with Javon Diggs. The Colts on the road, we talked about them. We liked how they looked in week number 1. They just ran into, in our eyes, a top 4 team in the NFL. The Colts, though, Anthony Richardson is special. This is a guy that it started off this season with a snap. He slipped and getting up from the slip. He does like a fadeaway, launches the ball 60 yards down the field. Perfect placement. And of course, to Alec Pierce, hard worker, knows the playbook inside and out. Caught it for a touchdown if I could talk correctly. So Anthony Richardson, outside of that, he had a lot of splash plays in this game, a lot of improvising, right, which is what we know he does best. His accuracy can be a little bit better, right? But outside of that, we know that's going to come with time, and especially with Shane Steichen in his ear, his decision making is only going to get better. His accuracy and placement should only get better. And Anthony Richardson, I think after week 1, Amir, I want your opinion on this. Do you believe now that Anthony Richardson can be a franchise guy?
It's week 1, so I'm not gonna jump the gun. The same way how I'm kind of treating, every other team, with grace. And, I agree with you that, this coach team still look great, no matter them losing. I would say for AR, obviously, the accuracy and processing, of the field definitely is still, growing. I said those are the only questions. But other than that, I mean, on the ground, he can run. He has an absolute cannon. I mean, he made some crazy plays, that shocked me personally. And, I think it's only going to get better. I think for him, I think he has to, just keep on doing what he's doing, not doing too much, not trying to go overboard because this Colts team is definitely legit in my eyes.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that, but you touched on it perfectly. Just do what you're doing. Don't try and be Superman. They play a Green Bay team that last week looked great until the last couple of seconds. Jordan Love went down with an injury. It found out it was an MCL injury, and he's going to be out for the first month of the season, or at least the next month of the NFL season. So Malik Willis, the guy they traded for in preseason, is set to be the starter for the next month. Not exciting if you're a Packers fan, especially because of how great that offense looked when Jordan Love was on the field. Malik Willis has done nothing in his career but prove to us he's not a great quarterback. He holds on to the ball way too long, takes way too many sacks, and turns the ball over more than he produces with it. So for that reason, I'm going to take the Colts on the road here, Amir. I think you'd agree.
Yep, taking the Colts on the road here.
The Browns and the Jacksonville Jaguars, 2 teams that, I'll say this. The Jags look better than the Browns in week number 1. The Jaguars just fell apart late. What's new? Last year, second half of the year, that's all they did as far as the season perspective. But on a game-to-game perspective, they just fell apart the second half of the year last year. And that trend seems to be continuing into this year. Last week, they were dominating early on against the Miami Dolphins, but some fumbles from Travis Etienne, and then ultimately just poor play calling. They fell apart in the second half of that one. But I will say Trevor Lawrence, for the majority of the game, was confident and dominant, and he looks to be worth that money going forward. For the Browns, Amir, Deshaun Watson. That's, Bakari, of course, another co-host on this channel. We talked about it in lengths off the podcast. But my basic summary for Deshaun Watson, you can only find so many reasons to defend a person. You can only defend someone for so long until it's time to, you got to give up on them. Now, again, it's only week 1. Let the season play out. Let's see what we have in Deshaun Watson. But, man, Amir, I mean, it can't get much worse than this.
Yeah, it's definitely, frustrating to watch. And, for Deshaun, he's talking about keeps turning the ball over. He's panicking back there. I understand, our offensive line play was, struggling, but, due to injury and stuff like that. But man, offensively, our offense is just, hitting the wall. And, I don't want to jump the gun and blame Stefanski for his play calling. I wish Ken Dorsey and other coaches on staff could have a hand in the play calling in our scheme as
Yes.
well. Because I mean, Deshaun is not clicking. I think there has to be a change offensively. You know, and just figure something out.
It just, again, the defense is still there. The defense can only do so much, however. Eventually,
Yeah.
the offense has to step up, and it starts with the quarterback. But it just seems like the vibe, the chemistry is just off with the entire offensive unit. It just seems like either the wide receivers don't believe in Watson, which is a problem in its own right. You need to believe in your quarterback. But it just seems like either they don't want to play for him, or again, they just don't believe in him. And again, that just kills the morale of the entire unit. And I also think the play calling, like you said, very predictable. It doesn't seem like we changed much from last year. But who are you taking in this matchup? Browns or the Jacksonville Jaguars in Jacksonville?
I wanted to go Cleveland here. I hope my bias isn't in the way. But offensively, we just didn't show enough promise. For me to go ahead and choose them over Jacksonville. And in my eyes, I was kind of confident that we're going to beat Dallas at home, start off hot. Possibly start this year off 3-1, 4-1, or whatever. But seeing how bad we played last week on both sides of the ball, you know, I'm gonna go ahead. I'm gonna go ahead and take Jacksonville here. At home. I think Jacksonville. They started the game off. Well against Miami. I hate going towards this route because me personally, I'm not a believer in Jacksonville. But I think us, as Browns fans, can honestly agree that we, showed a lot of struggle in that Week 1 game.
For the sake of Cleveland, for the sake of Deshaun Watson, which he needs this, I'm going to take the Browns on the road. Jacksonville, of course, they looked a lot better than the Browns in week number 1, and I can acknowledge that. But again, Trevor Lawrence struggles when he's under pressure. The Browns can produce that if Myles Garrett decides to show up and be what Myles Garrett was last year and in years prior. I think this is a defense that's going to play better than ever, and I think they're going to give the offense the best chance possible. We just need Deshaun Watson to be Joe Flacco. Just do the bare minimum, protect the football, and move the sticks. That's all we need you to do, right? And even if you kick, 4 field goals, we're putting more points on the board. Again, just have the offense be efficient is what I'm getting at here. I'm going to take the Browns on the road. Isn't my biased? Probably. The New York Jets, talk about bias. For me, I've been talking about them all off season. I think Rodgers still has it. Even at 40 years old, you talked about it early in the show. It still looks like he's got it. He still looks like he could be an elite quarterback. But I just think from top to bottom, whether if it was just they're just not in San Francisco's league, or the fact that they just need to fine tune some things offensively, defensively, play calling wise. You just need to fine tune from top to bottom, I believe. And they have plenty of time to do that until the end of the season. For the Titans, man, the defense showed up. That's a positive. They are currently, based on yardage, the number 1 defense in the NFL. But again, Will Levis looked terrible. Will Levis threw the game away quite literally. And overall, outside of Tony Pollard, not much to be excited about in this Tennessee offense going forward. But hey, Shigo Konkwu scored a touchdown. He's got a pretty cool name. Amir, who are you taking in this matchup? Battle of 2 on paper, really good defenses.
Yeah, I'm taking the Jets on a roll here, and honestly, you brought up a great point. I mean, offensively, this Titans team struggled Week 1, bad. And, I'm a believer in the Bears team, in that Bears defense. But it's a difference, between someone struggling and just playing absolute terrible. I thought this Titans offense played terrible, literally throwing the game away. I'm a believer in Will Levis, but that was horrible. Also on special teams too. I mean, getting a
Yes.
block, a pump blocks, them scoring on that as well. And I think that this Jets team, they showed enough promise in the first half of that game with San Fran for me to go ahead and take them on the road here.
Also, not a great sign when the new head coach of Tennessee, Bill Callahan, shades Will Levis in the post-game presser. Something to look out for. But again, I will agree with you. I'm still on the Jets bandwagon. I'm taking them to bounce back in week number 2. Rematch of the divisional round in the NFC playoffs last season. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they head into this game at 1-0, going to Detroit, just like in the playoffs last year, to take on the Lions. For Tampa Bay, Baker Mayfield baked. I hate to use that analogy and that saying, but he quite literally did. I mean, he had over 300 yards, 4 touchdowns. Chris Godwin was back healthy and he looked dominant. Mike Evans found a way into the end zone. This offense, it really came down to no Dave Canales, which is what everyone was worried about, including me. No problem, right? This offense looked even at times better than what they did last year for stretches. Now they go into this matchup, of course, with a chip on their shoulder, trying to get their revenge from last year's playoffs. But for the Lions, they're on their way, right? I mean, there's not much you can say. They played exactly Detroit Lions football. Now, I do want to say that they won last week against a top 10 team in the Rams without getting Amon-Ra or Sam Laporta the football. This offense is only going to look better under Ben Johnson, who is going to be a head coach next season. I'm taking the Lions here. There's no reason until they prove me wrong. I don't see any flaws in this team.
Yeah, honestly, this team has no major weaknesses. And, seeing them, not get the pass game really going, but still dominate on the ground with ease, against a Rams team who did a great job sort of, build up that front seven after Aaron Donald left. I think there's no reason for me not to take Detroit here at home.
Yeah, they ran the ball every single play of that overtime game, or in the overtime period against the LA Rams. They didn't even need to throw, right? That's how dominant this offensive line is and how great of a play caller that Ben Johnson is. So again, Detroit there at home. Quick one here. The Raiders just didn't look good, and I usually have 2 to 3 notes about every team. What I'm going to say here is Devontae Adams only had 6 targets for an entire game. And this offense didn't look great from top to bottom. So my question to you, Amir, do you trust Antonio Pierce to turn this thing around? As a culture setter, as a player's coach that he is, do you think he can get in their ear and kind of turn this thing around?
It's only so much a player's coach could really do, but it's like when you're lacking personnel, there's this lack of personnel. I think offensively, watching Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers, kind of seeing their facial expressions, seeing their body language, it seems like honestly they're just unhappy about not having a quarterback.
Yeah.
And so, I think that, offensively, this team is definitely going to struggle this week. This Baltimore team, despite them losing against KC, they look great. They looked amazing on both sides of the ball. And I think defensively, this Baltimore team went ahead and they go ahead and still look great, despite losing McDonald anyway. And I think that, this week is going to even add more to unhappiness on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I think the Ravens their offense is going to look a lot better, right? Justice
Yeah.
Hill and Isaiah Likely might not have as crazy of games as they did last week, but that means Mark Andrews is going to get the ball more, right? Zay Flowers is going to get the ball more. Derrick Henry is going to be more effective on the field. And, playing a defense like the Raiders, which is far worse than the Kansas City Chiefs, it's going to be a breath of fresh air for the for the offensive coordinator, Todd Monken, and Lamar Jackson in this offense. So excited to see how they can bounce back on that side of the ball. Now, I will say for the Raiders, maybe you try and lean more on Zamir White, right? You had him as your starting running back. Maybe you can get the ground game going a little bit more. It'll make Gardner Minshew's job easier. But the Ravens have literally been the best defense against the running back position dating back to week 1 of last year, Amir. So not sure how they're going to move the ball for Vegas, but this is the NFL. Weird things happen. And I wouldn't be shocked if they just come out here and drop like 30 on the Ravens and win this game because all signs point to they shouldn't win this game. But I'm going to take the Ravens. You're taking the Ravens as well?
Yep.
Taking the Ravens there. NFC West matchup, 2 teams that are 0-1, 2 teams that were there, right, to get the win, but they just couldn't close the game out, at least not the way that they hoped. For the Rams, after the game, another MCL injury. Puka's going to be out for the next couple of weeks. He's going to be placed on IR. They're hoping to have him back probably by the mid-season mark. For Cooper Kupp, man, is that dude back. I think he had 12 receptions, a touchdown, of course, over 100 yards receiving. He's back. And if you watch the offense, it looks a lot like the Triple Crown year where it's Stafford snaps the ball. His first read's Cooper Kupp. If he's there, the ball's out in 2 seconds, and Cooper Kupp is oftentimes moving the chains. Now, you talked about it earlier, but the pass rush, super underrated. I think they played great in week number 1, despite how that overtime period ended. They go to Arizona. The defense is in question. It was not a great effort from the Arizona unit from the second quarter on in that Buffalo game. But this is a team that was right there with Buffalo, who we both think could be a top 10 team, and they didn't use McBride, and they didn't really use Marvin Harrison either. So my question to you here, Who do you have in this matchup? And again, what do you want to see from both sides?
So for the Rams obviously help, number one. I think on both sides of the ball, they honestly look solid. The secondary did show some questions, early on especially. And but I think overall, I mean, the Rams team is obviously just getting back to full strength. The same problem happened last year. They started off, banged up. Cooper Kupp was obviously hurt early on. Stafford was dealing with injuries early on. The offensive line was hurt. And, it kind of took them into that halfway season point to really go on a run. And I think, right now, you know, work on getting those guys back. In the meantime, it's not much you could really do. You know, besides just win games. That you should win. If you end up playing juggernauts, with the depleted roster and losing, you might have to just accept that. And, I think for this Cardinals team, defensively, they honestly struggle big time.
Yeah.
And, seeing Buffalo, not only dominate on the ground but in the air, seeing Josh Allen go ahead and get guys like Shakir involved. Keon Coleman made some plays. Kincaid looks great as well. On that team.
Mac Hollins
I
got a
think that
touchdown.
exactly like exactly. I think this Cardinals defense showed a lot of questions. Offensively they honestly looked solid without using Marvin Harrison, which I was surprised about. Kyler missed him a few times, but I think seeing the run game, seeing James kind of look service, seeing him look solid. I think that this team definitely has some sparks, and I was going to lean towards Arizona at first year. Because of the injuries, for the Rams, but I'm taking the Rams here. I think the Rams could do just enough offensively to kind of dominate this defense.
For the exact reason that you just stated, I will also take the LA Rams. I was leaning towards the Cardinals, but of course, I believe in the Rams a little bit more. Next matchup, we have an interesting one, the Cincinnati Bengals, where they lost to maybe the worst team in football last week, or at least on paper before the season. We thought the Patriots were going to fit that criteria, but big upset in week number one. Now, in the grace of the Cincinnati Bengals, Jamar Chase was on a snap count. T. Higgins was out, and they were adjusting to a new offense without a guy like Joe Mixon carrying the load. They go to Kansas City. Kansas City, of course, they might be better than ever. And we've talked about that in depth on the channel. Now, I do want to say Marquise Brown might make his debut this week for the team. So I'm interested to see how much that affects Rashee Rice, who looked amazing week one, or Xavier Worthy, who also looked amazing in week one and had a pair of touchdowns. But I think they're better than ever, Amir, in the Mahomes era. And the only thing I want to say is, do we get a little bit more Travis Kelce involvement in the offense this week? But for the Bengals, the one thing that's on your side is Joe Burrow is 1-3 in openers, and he's 3-0 in the regular season against Patrick Mahomes in his career. So if there's any quarterback to be the kryptonite of Mahomes outside of Tom Brady, it seems to be Joe Burrow. Amir, your thoughts on this matchup? Can the Bengals get back on track?
I think the Bengals will get back on track, but I think this week is not the week. I'm taking Kansas City at home here, and a huge part of that is because of how bad that Bengals run defense looked this past week. What I mean? They made Ramondre Stevenson look like prime beast mode. He was running all over them with ease, and I think that this interior offensive lineup for KC is going to be to dominate that run game with ease.
Yeah, I unfortunately big Joe Burrow fan. I think when fully healthy, this is a guy that has led his team fully healthy from season start to the end, has led his team to the AFC title game or the Super Bowl every single year. He just needs to be healthy. But I'm going to take the Chiefs until they prove me wrong. That's really I guess, the only criteria I need. The Steelers, the questions are, is it Russell Wilson or is it Justin Fields? Chris Boswell was the MVP of last week. Why? Because he had all 18 points from his right leg. 6 field goals for the Pittsburgh offense, and that was all the points that they accounted for. The defense, I will say this, just like the Browns, it can only do so much until the offense needs to step up and do their job, especially at the quarterback position. Now, Russell Wilson was going to be the starter before last week, but he had a calf injury, and Justin Fields took over, and they won. So here's the question. Russell Wilson, playing his last team, does he get to start as an extra motivation, right, to play his old team and to, maybe give this offense a little bit of life? Or do you go with the quarterback in Justin Fields that got you the win last week? That's one question. Now, you go to Denver. Denver, just Sean Payton needs to be better. The play calling needs to be better. Now, I will say the defense did their job, but offensively, Bo Nix just didn't have much help around him. The thing I'll say for this matchup, you're playing a team in Pittsburgh that has quarterback problems or quarterback questions, and their offense just doesn't look great. You could say the same thing about Denver, but Denver has a good defense and the home field advantage behind them. Amir, your thoughts on this matchup?
Man, this game might be a final score of like 6-3. I mean, this game is going to be a straight slugfest, straight straight defense. I might fall asleep watching this Sunday, But I really hate saying Pittsburgh's going to start the year off 2-0. I really hate saying that, but I mean that defense is just too legit. I was saying it all off season. Before they even got a guy like Dante Jackson, I'm like, this is going to be a top 5 defense in the league, and I think that Bo Nix is going to have a tough time really moving the ball. I mean, he struggled last week. This defense is even better. And, I think for Pittsburgh, obviously their offense is definitely piss poor as well. But, I mean, they have way more experience, a lot more veterans. And, I think they could get this dub.
I'm going to take the Pittsburgh Steelers as well. Do you think it'll be Fields or Russell Wilson? I think they probably go back to Russell Wilson.
Yeah, I personally think, they go back to Russ. I mean, he's the more proven vet, older guy. I think Fields is more so, a long-term investment, and I think they'll kind of give, Russ a shot to kind of see if his offense can do better than they did last week.
Absolutely. Chicago, Sunday Night Football, of course, with Caleb Williams. They were the league's worst offense as far as yardage last week. Caleb didn't even pass 100 yards passing. No pun intended. He didn't surpass 100 total yards in the passing department. Hopefully that makes a little bit more sense. Now, after the game, we got some news about Rome Odunze. He's going to be questionable going forward with an MCL injury. That seems to be a trend. I don't know. I've never seen as many MCL injuries as this in one certain week. But again, that injury bug struck the NFL in week number 1. They go to Houston. They play a team that is as advertised, including Stephon Diggs, if not better than what we thought they could be. Now, again, it's only 1 week, small sample size, but they did have a top 2 offense. The defense was top 10, and they look like they could be a Super Bowl contender. They're at home here, Amir. Who do you think wins this matchup?
I'm gonna be honest, the NFL is setting Caleb up by having him play Houston on Sunday Night Football week 2.
Yes.
I mean, Houston should dominate this game. I don't think there's any defense that can really, slow Houston down, despite this Bears defense being legit in my opinion. And, I think the way this Bears offense struggled this past week. I think you go into a game against a Houston team that's completely loaded from top to bottom. I think it was way too much for them.
I think they need to send Will Levis a gift basket because if he didn't throw that game away, they would be 0-2. But I'm going to take Houston here. Chicago, you're still fine. You're 1-1 after 2 weeks. Kind of right where you want to be in Caleb's rookie year. Closing off the week, Monday Night Football, the Atlanta Falcons, they got some questions. They go to Philadelphia, and they have some questions as well. We'll start with Atlanta. Stationary Kirk. And I say this because he looked very stiff. And I understand he's coming off a big knee injury or Achilles. I forget which one it was. He's coming off an injury. Pretty serious injury. And it's not usual that a quarterback doesn't have at least a full year of recovery time. He's back sooner than that, and he started week 1. Now, if you watch that game, it looked like he would, okay, of course, get the snap in a lot of pistol sets, weirdly enough, and he would barely he wouldn't have a drop. He wouldn't drop back. He wouldn't take a 3-step drop, 5-step drop. It was catch the ball, get back, and throw the football. Right? Not much drive behind his throws. Now, the offense still looked good outside of Kirk Cousins. The defense looked good, but the offense with Kirk Cousins being as limited as he was, I don't know if that was just the rust of being away from football for 8 months or whatever it was, but it wasn't the same Kirk Cousins mobility-wise that we saw the last couple of years in Minnesota. Now, for Philadelphia, the secondary is still in question. They improved it. Now, again, I think they just need to get some more chemistry together. But Green Bay was able to throw all over Philadelphia at times. Now, when the Eagles played the Rams last year, Amir, Raheem Morris was the defensive coordinator. Philadelphia in this offense had 454 yards against Raheem Morris's defensive scheme. Your thoughts on all of this and everything I've said, this matchup, who are you taking? And do you think the Eagles can be that dominant yet again?
I'm taking Philly, in this game. Philly's offense is better than it was last year, surprisingly. I mean, you go ahead and bring in Saquon. They honestly showed last game, they can not only dominate on the ground, but also in the air. And, this Falcons defense definitely is, probably a top 5 defense in this league, outside of Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Houston, teams like that. But I think that this Falcons team, the way they struggled offensively last week, and, the thing about Philly though too, I'd say is that despite them struggling and kind of showing some questions last week against against that Packers team, I would say I think Jordan Love, that overall scheme is definitely going to give them more trouble than this Falcons team. Seeing Kirk really struggle kind of hurt his confidence a little bit this past week against Pittsburgh, and now he's going to Philly against a juggernaut team, and going against a team where it's like he's gonna have to score for 30 points to win. He's gonna have to. And, I think that Philly's gonna have way too much to really give him a shot at doing that.
Yeah, I'm going to take Philly as well. Now I think Atlanta, you're still in a good position, right? I think you can
Yeah,
still go out there and win this division. After these first 4 weeks for Atlanta, they should pretty much win almost every single game on paper. I think after this in week 3, you have Kansas City. So you could start 0-3 here in Atlanta. And I mean, what's better than having some quarterback questions? So Michael Penix might be getting some conversation after week 3
Whew.
because they're probably going to lose to Philly and then Kansas City.
Yeah,
Regardless, I think after that, they can get back on track. Here's the quick recap. Of course, last week we had the same exact predictions. We differed on 2 games this week. That, of course, is the Thursday night game tonight and then the Cleveland and Jacksonville game. But outside of that, you see the winners that we share there in the early window. Here is the 4 o'clock window and, of course, the late night games. That's going to do it. Episode 208. Now, I want to say this because I had a question, of course, on last week's video. No, not every single week is going to be like this. Me and Amir, when it gets to weeks 3, weeks 4, and so on and so forth, we like to start adding games to the shows, right? Because there's only so much you can talk about each team until it just gets to be, just too repetitive, right?
yeah,
Because you can only say so much about each team. And as the season goes on, we all know pretty much the same things about each team. So in week 4, we're going to start bringing some of those games to the show, making these these in-game deep dives kind of on the back burner, if that makes sense. If not, go check out last year's videos. Of course, we're going to follow that model this upcoming year as well. Any last thoughts before we get out of here, Amir? Of course, thank you for making time for the show.
yes, sir. I'm happy to be back, man. Every single week, I'm happy to be on here talk football. I mean, Sunday, the day after my game, my body was beat down, so I had to sit on my recliner and watch football from the beginning of the day all the way to the end. It was great.
No better medicine, all right, than rest in football, especially on a Sunday. But that's it. I'll see you guys next week. Go enjoy some football tonight, this weekend, and I will be back Monday with some fantasy football content. Until then, stay happy, stay healthy. Get out of here.